Welcome back to Que Pasa Nashville. My name is Christina Allen, and thank you again for joining us. I'm excited to be speaking to Congressman Jim Cooper and State Senator Dickerson about the Project Register, an initiative bipartisan to get people not only to register to vote, but the next thing is show up and vote. So earlier you were stating that there are 4 elections in Davidson County this year alone. With the transit being on the issue for the May 1st and local candidates, you know, transit's going to bring in a different crowd. Those are going to be first-time voters. I mean, there's some issues that each of these are going to bring out different voters. But there's always a core, and that's something I've learned. No matter what, there's about 40,000 Davidson County people will show up no matter what. But with an issue like transit, you know, what is expected to turn out?
We don't really know, and that's up to the individual citizens in Nashville to decide. There are some 700,000 people who live here. There are probably 400,000 or 500,000 who are registered to vote. But in some past elections in May, we've only had 40,000 people turn out. That's really just a tiny fraction of people
making decisions,
ruling the whole rest of the city. That's really not fair, especially on an issue like transit. That is a big decision for our community, and whether you're for transit or against transit, your voice should be heard, and that means to be registered to vote before April 2nd, and then show up at the polls.
And it's easy to vote. I mean, there's the 3 weeks. I mean, in almost every library, it's very easy to walk in. Doesn't take much time.
15 minutes. It
does. And I always register. I mean, I always vote early just because of that time. But of course, on election day, it has to be within your precinct. So when you go online to register, can you see what precinct you're on if you put in your zip code?
They will send you a blue card if you're successfully registered, and it will be written on that card where your precinct is. And on election day, the final day, you have to vote there, as you say. But we're very generous with voters. We allow 3 weeks when you can vote in most any library or city hall. It'll be posted. But on election day, you have to know your precinct.
So you mentioned earlier about corporations and another slew of people kind of behind you. Tell me a little bit about who's part of that, and why is it important for companies to really have a voice in this as well?
So, I don't want to speak for Congressman Cooper in this regard, but we were trying to think of a new way to attract people to vote who were who newly moved to Nashville.
Correct.
Okay, Nashville's the it city, obviously, and we've got 100 people moving roughly a day, give or take. And so one of the thoughts we had was, why are they moving here? Well, they have a job, so let's talk to some of the folks in corporate America and say, if you have someone moving to Nashville, relocating here, maybe coming in as a vice president or something, wouldn't you like them to be active? Wouldn't you like them to have a voice? And so we reached out to them and have gotten great response from people in the Nashville business community who have agreed to just basically let their employees know that you can.
By the way,
you can register online, and then every year just send out a brief email. And to my knowledge, we haven't had any pushback on that.
How easy is that? Yeah.
It's super easy, and let's face it, if you have a business in Nashville and there's a particular public policy decision of interest to you, transit being a great one, let's say you're supporting transit, you want all your employees to be registered so they can go out and vote.
I think corporate social responsibility for all these companies are in the same way, whether it's private, corporate, nonprofits as well. I know working with the nonprofit community, they just, the Center for Nonprofit just had an initiative on transit, didn't take sides, but said, hey, as nonprofit, how can we look at this issue and be educated on it? So obviously businesses and universities and everyone like that?
Absolutely. We've signed up all the major universities. As Steve says, we've had almost no pushback because pretty much everybody is for more voting. It's just a question of the individual taking out time to vote during that voting period. And it's not just newcomers to Nashville. Some longtime residents of our city have perhaps moved, and so their voting address isn't current. They're in a new precinct. Or what's happened recently, if you haven't voted in a couple of elections, if you've forgotten or missed it or didn't care, whatever, then sometimes you're stricken from the rolls and you have to re-register. So there are a number of things. You need to make sure that your registration is current. You go to the Secretary of State's website, the Tennessee Secretary of State, and not only check on your current status and your voting history, you can also check on other people if you have their full name and their birthday. That's all it takes on the website to find out, because sometimes I've checked on some of my neighbors, all of whom claim they vote regularly, but it turns out that they don't even know the elections they're missing, so they vote about half the time.
I think it happened to me. My precinct moved, and I did not know that. And you're going at the last minute, and I'm like, no, going across town, and I mean, it's frustrating, but I mean, we're growing. Some areas are growing faster, and they have to accommodate for that.
Sure, and precincts, not to get too far in the weeds with this, are small, and sometimes they're sort of interdigitated, and so you might actually live closer to a polling place, and it's not your precinct, and so you show up on election day, and you're in the wrong place.
That's why you early vote.
Right. Well, exactly. And so there are all sorts of unavoidable sort of impediments there. Again, you have to think ahead. You have to plan ahead. You have to get time off from work. But what we're trying to do is we're removing the excuse. You don't know there's an election. We're trying to get the notoriety out there, get the name recognition up, as it were, and we're trying to get people registered.
Now, do you have counterparts that are doing this in other parts of the state?
We're trying to spread it statewide and ideally nationwide. It takes local officials who are interested in doing it, or good-hearted local citizens. And there's so many aspects to this. We want to stress, too, that it's very important for every voter to be informed, especially on the positions like, say, judgeships. Unless you're a lawyer, you don't really know the level of court. But it's very important to study up on it. And the newspaper usually has a good sample ballot in advance and articles on the pros and cons of each candidate. So it's very important to really know what you're voting for, because there's some elections we were just talking about during the break where it's decided by one vote, or sometimes 17 votes.
Yep, literally.
That means a couple of families can determine the whole outcome of the election. So we need to make sure that those families or those individuals decide wisely for the future of our city.
And I think those stories where candidates don't vote and they forget in small little rural areas and they lose by a couple of votes, and it could be family members. And I think you're right. That the one vote can make a difference. I think that as Davidson County grows and we look at our demographic shift here at Que Pasa Nashville, we really talk about, like I said, the opportunities and challenges Latinos bring to Middle Tennessee. And we come from all over, economically, status, and political parties. And I think, we're not all Democrats and we're not all Republicans, but it's very, with that growth comes also our global community as we become a mecca for our Kurdish community or so. And they are becoming U.S. citizens. A statistic here is 1/3 of new Americans in Nashville are already naturalized U.S. citizens, and more than 40% of Nashville's non-citizens, or approximately 18,300 residents, are estimated to be immediately eligible to apply for citizenships, which means these people take voting more seriously than someone born and raised here. And that is, for some, that's power because you think they can sway them, but as they become more assimilated and educated, they have their own decisions to make, but they take it more serious than I think some of our neighbors do, and I think their neighbors need to realize that as well. But I think with that growth and those opportunities, we got to continue to have this as a conversation. What are the other challenges you have? Any resistance?
No, we have over 150 local companies, for-profit, nonprofit, universities, schools, all agreeing to help their employees learn about this opportunity, because it is a great opportunity. Our state and our country will be all the better if more people participate. So we've gotten almost universal approval of this. That's hundreds of thousands of local employees who will be contacted in the next few weeks to let them know about the elections. That's very important, as is our earlier effort to register high school seniors, because they're 18, and you can actually start the registration process when you're 17 in Tennessee. You can't vote until you're 18.
Because I have a 17-year-old.
So we talk to juniors and seniors in high school, and it really helps educate them in civics, because if they have skin in the game, if they know, hey, I can vote. Now, you can't vote on your smartphone. You have to vote in person. It's a little bit old-fashioned that way.
They can handle that.
That's a process that is very important for them to learn about our great democracy.
And I think that's the key thing. As we wrap up, I'm going to remind people, you go to www.govotentn.com. That's www.govotentn.com. Both 18-year-olds, 17 can start the process, but we have to remember our neighbors, adults, our challenges, that we need to have this as a right, as a privilege, but as something that we should take serious and embrace it. So thank you both very much for being on the show, and really for your initiative and time, because it's the right thing to do. I mean, we have to do it. And I think hopefully the needle will move and we will not be 50th. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you for joining Que Pasa Nashville. Join us each week as we look at the beautiful demographic shift Middle Tennessee's occurring and see how we can educate you on that. Muchas gracias.